Welcome to the Why Dad podcast. We are your hosts, Paul Wandry and Andrew Stopelstead, and we are on a mission to figure out what it really means to be a man, a husband, and a father. Not as experts, but as guys just trying to figure it out, learning what actually matters, what's just noise, and how to become the versions of ourselves our families need and deserve. This is a place for honest conversations, real habits, and the kind of growth that happens intentionally. We're redefining fatherhood one habit at a time, and today, to help us along that journey, we're joined by Ken Kunken. Ken's life changed dramatically when a football injury left him paralyzed at the age of 20. Instead of letting that define him, he went on to become an attorney, build a career advocating for others, and later became a husband and father of triplets. His story is one of a resilience, perspective, and what it really means to build a meaningful life after everything changes. Ken, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me as your guest.
Absolutely. Honored to.
Yes, we're looking forward to this conversation. And so we like to start our episodes with the same question for all of our guests, and that is, what is the most dad thing you've done this week?
Well, other than worrying constantly about my three boys, I spoke to at least one on the phone, and my wife's been in touch with all of them, and just taking it day by day, making sure they're all doing well.
It's a great dad. Great dad.
Yeah.
So you got to understand, my boys are now 21 years old. They're juniors in 3 separate colleges in upstate New York. So it's not like I wake up each morning and my boys are in the same house. They're a few hundred miles away.
Yeah. They've flown the nest, so to speak. It's that much harder to keep tabs on them, I'm sure. Yeah. But yeah, I think that, I worry enough about my 5-year-old and my 1-year-old, and I can only imagine, having grown kids, and I'm sure the worry never stops. Yeah. But yeah, Ken, thank you so much for joining us. For our listeners, can you give us kind of your story? Obviously, we kind of touched on it briefly where, that moment when you were playing football and you made that tackle and your life changed. And then on top of that, your life, like, that isn't even all of it. Your life was difficult up until that point too, losing your mom shortly after you were born, and then being a young child while your dad navigated a difficult marriage. And then you had the life-changing tackle in college. Can you kind of walk us through that and where that has led you to where you are today?
Well, I was injured making a tackle on a kickoff in a lightweight football game at Cornell University in 1970. So at that time, I was 20 years old and a junior in college. And I must say, at that time, I became almost totally paralyzed. I spent almost 10 months in various hospitals and rehabilitation centers. And never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would ever get married, let alone become a father, let alone a father of triplets. So it's taken quite a turn since that time in 1970.
Yeah, I can imagine that, Ken. So, like, you forged for yourself a life of success that anybody would be happy with, as far as, becoming an attorney and the roles and the success that you have had there. And then, so walk us through when you realized that maybe marriage was an option, and then fatherhood was an option all of a sudden on the table, and walk us through your decision process there and what ultimately led you to saying yes to both of those things.
Well, since my injury, I've been almost totally paralyzed from the shoulders down. And when I was injured, and for many years afterwards, I figured and thought to myself that I would never, ever get married. And I basically ruled that out. But I remember speaking to my Aunt Betty, who told me I shouldn't rule that out, that someday I may meet the woman of my dreams and consider marriage. And that actually happened to me. It was, at the time, being very happy as an uncle to nephews and nieces that I had. And when I got married in 2003, my wife indicated that she would like to have my baby, and not just a baby, my baby.
Right.
She said she wanted to see a little Kunken running around our home. Now, keep in mind, I was now 54 years old. I turned 54 in 2004,
Mhm.
before my boys were born. And I had been almost totally paralyzed for more than 34 years. So never, ever did I think, one, again, that I would be married, but two, that I would become a father. But my wife convinced me that because she knew how much I loved being an uncle, she thought I would be a very
Mhm.
good father. I still thought it would probably be impossible for me to father a child, but we pursued various options, including in vitro fertilization. And we're very excited to learn it still might be possible for someone in my condition to father a child.
Mhm.
So we pursued it, and I was present when we went for the sonogram and found out my wife was not just pregnant, but pregnant with triplets,
Yeah.
which was
Yep.
just astounding. And I really questioned, one, how we were going to manage with triplets, and two, how I could become a dad since I was so physically limited.
Mhm.
I knew my role as a dad would basically be limited to just being the provider for the family and hopefully earning enough money to provide for my wife and children. And I was also present in the delivery room when my wife gave birth to these triplets. And I was just in awe. I could not believe how my life had changed what seemed like in an instant and has
Mhm.
changed forever for the better in so many ways. So
Yeah.
I'm a very proud father of 20-year-old college students who are doing absolutely great. And I couldn't be more in love with my three sons.
Thank you for
Mm,
sharing that. I wanted to take it a step back because I'm at a point where you were. Love being an uncle right
mm.
now. I've got 5 nieces and nephews that currently live with me. What was there anything from being an uncle that you took with you into raising your 3 boys up to
Well,
today?
absolutely. I thought being an uncle would be the closest I would ever become to
Mhm.
being a father. So every time I was with my nephews and nieces, I almost started treating them as if they were my own children because I
Mm,
felt that was the closest I would ever be.
yeah.
And I just loved being an uncle. I loved having that relationship with my nephews and nieces.
Mhm.
And, I have an older brother who's 2 years older than me, who has two children. And I saw what a great dad he was and continues to be,
Yeah.
and how enjoyable he was having in his life, spending time with his kids.
Mhm.
And he let me share that with him as many times as we could. And I just love being around children
Yeah.
and mentoring them and helping them with
Mhm.
projects and being whatever I could be to be an asset to them and help them in any way I could.
Yeah. Is that what ultimately convinced you that despite being paralyzed and despite the foreseeable challenges that you wanted to, take on this challenge of being a dad, which is difficult enough on its own, let alone being paralyzed? Is that what kind of convinced you or what else convinced you?
Well, I would say that was partly what convinced me.
Mhm.
What convinced me is that I was head over heels in love with the woman who became my wife, Anna. And when Anna told me she wanted to become a mother
Mhm.
and have my baby, that absolutely convinced me I would do
Hmm.
anything
Yeah.
to make Anna happy. And that seemed to be the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And then now you're blessed with those 3 amazing boys.
You bet.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Mm,
So,
mm.
so you said you were in the room when you saw the sonogram and you realized that, oh, there's not just one, there's three. Um, help us uh, s- put us in your shoes there. Like, what was going through your mind when you're like, oh no, there's three, or maybe it wasn't. Oh no, but that's what would have gone
Well,
through my mind.
well, it's interesting. It's really interesting because going through in vitro was not easy for
Mhm.
us. I mean, again, this was, more than 20 years ago, and it's
Yeah.
developed a lot more since then. And it was very difficult for my wife to do everything that she needed to do. And I remember thinking before we even decided to have it, well, before we agreed to have a child, that both my wife and I both have a brother and a sister.
Mhm.
And we love having a brother and a sister, and we felt it was important that if we were gonna have a child, we should have at least 2 so
Yeah.
that they would have a sibling.
Right.
So when we talked about it, we agreed if we're gonna have a child, we should have at least 2. So the whole time we were going through this, and Anna became pregnant, I kept saying and thinking, "Wouldn't it be great if we had twins? Wouldn't
Mhm.
this be great?" And I have a younger sister who actually has identical twins. So I figured, oh, would this be ideal? And when we went through in vitro, there were 3 viable embryos at the time of the implantation. So the doctor suggested we implant all 3 and hope that at least one took.
Mhm.
And I
Mm.
remember thinking, "Oh, absolutely. Wouldn't it be great? This increases our chance of having twins." Lo and behold,
Y'all.
we got even luckier and had triplets.
Three birds, one stone, right? But
Mm,
yeah, wow, love to hear that. When I was approaching fatherhood, um, I had all the questions that were going through my mind, and like, how am I going to do this? Like, what do I need to do? Um, and I imagine that many of the same questions plus some were going through your head. What were some of the main ones, and how did you decide to tackle them?
well, tackle's a good word because, that changed my life making a tackle playing football.
Yeah.
Growing up, my brother and I were both very active athletically. So was my father. My father had played football in college. So I always just thought of a father as somebody who was very physically active, could do a lot with his child or children. I mean, I remember my father helping teach us how to throw and catch a baseball, brought us to athletic events. And I got to watch my brother, since he was older than me, participating in sports. And I always felt that was a big part of being a father
Mhm.
was doing things physically with your child or
Mhm.
children. So I really questioned, how can I be a good father if I cannot do that or engage in those activities? And I felt, well, I'd be more like an uncle. Maybe my brother would take them to different athletic events and teach them how to throw and catch a baseball. And I would cheer them on from the sidelines and be more as a provider than somebody physically active and involved in their lives.
And is that how it played out? Or did your perspective of what it means to be a father as, your boys were born and started growing, did that change?
Well, it sure did. I mean, I tried to do whatever I could physically to
Mhm.
be involved in their care. And since I really can't move my hands or my arms as well, it was really difficult. But I can remember having my wife put one of my children down on my lap board that I keep in front of me, on a pillow. And with a bottle balancing on one of my arms, I was able to feed one of my sons. And that was incredible,
Oh,
the
yeah.
experience of doing that and see my son looking up at me
Mhm.
and what I assumed was a smile, although I don't know if he could even smile at that age.
Yeah.
It was the greatest feeling in the world. So I tried doing whatever
Yeah.
I could to help my boys, and that
Mhm.
included when they were old enough to just sit on my lap, take them for walks in the wheelchair, and try and teach them things by pointing out this is an airplane or, this is a sewer or a car or, teach them whatever I could and going for walks with them. And it was just the greatest feeling in the world to think I could still make a difference in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I was taking a look at some of the pictures on your website, and you have some from, your college days and like when you're in the hospital, post injury, and then throughout your life. And there's some incredible photos. And some of the ones that really got me were the ones where like you have all three of your boys on your lap and, taking
Right.
them for a ride or reading them a book or whatever it is. And, it warmed my heart to see, like amongst all the challenges, like you were still able to get that physical connection, which is so important. And
Oh, it's the
like
greatest thing in the world. And, when I would come home from work and my boys would greet me at the door, what an incredible feeling that was to see
I
them run to greet me when I
I
come
bet.
home. I tell you, it was tough leaving each day to leave them, but to be able to take all 3 at once on a walk, by
Mhm.
them sitting on my lap or watching television together with them, it was just tremendous. Boy, did that pick up my spirits.
Mhm.
So, and just being there when they were doing different activities, just knowing I was involved with watching them with whatever they did, being present in their lives
Mhm.
made a big difference for me, but I think for them as well.
Well, I was just gonna say, there's a theme we've been hearing with a lot of the dads. It's, I'm having a struggle being present, especially now with all the technological advances. We can be in the same room, but we're on the phone, or whatever. And here you are living out just the fullness of being present and wanting to be a part of every moment that you possibly can.
Absolutely. I mean, that brought me the most enjoyment. And, there were times when obviously my wife needed to go out to do the shopping or, run errands, and I would be alone with my three little kids. And we weren't really sure who was babysitting for who, right? Because they needed an adult there and be present, but I needed
Mhm.
physical help
Yeah.
for them to give me a drink or turn on a light, or doing whatever, wiping my nose or, doing whatever else, I would need done. And to spend that time alone with the kids and helping each other, it was great. And during the pandemic, the boys were home from school and, I'd be home with them.
Mhm.
It was just great to spend even more time with them each day,
Yeah.
and get that experience. But, I might add that my boys grew up obviously with a father in a wheelchair, and they were so attuned to helping me
Mhm.
that there'd be times where they'd go out with friends and they'd come back and say, "Dad, you could go there. We checked. There's a ramp." And this is without me even saying anything.
Yeah.
And I remember one time I went just with one of my boys, Joey. He was maybe 6 years old, where we went to a stop and shop to pick up some supplies and groceries. And while we were there, I unfortunately became very dizzy. I have problems with low blood pressure. And here I am alone, well, with my 6-year-old son in a crowded store. Actually, my wife is saying he was closer to 9 years old, and people are crowding around. And my son stayed very calm. And I said, "Could you give me a pill?" I had pills in my pocket to raise my blood pressure. And could you lift up my legs so they were a little higher level, closer to my heart? And he did all of this without panicking, without crying, without asking for help. And he seemed to be perfectly comfortable doing this, even in a crowd, because he had done this for me many times in the past.
Mhm.
So he
Mhm.
didn't get upset. He didn't cry. He didn't need any help. And quite frankly, I felt very confident that here I was with just my 9-year-old son. And I felt I was in really good hands because he knew exactly what to do.
Yeah.
Young men already at a young age. Just
Absolutely.
that's
Absolutely. And they're particularly caring for other individuals who need help.
yeah.
We've done whatever we could to expose them to other individuals who need help, whether it be at volunteering in situations, or I'm a member of what's called the Viscardi Center on Long Island, where they help other individuals with disabilities. We've brought my boys there many times where they've met many other people with disabilities. And they become so accustomed to being around people with disabilities that it's not even like they need to think twice about somebody
Right.
being a little different than them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of wisdom there because, I mean, where does fear and even like dislike and comparing and whatever come from? It comes from not knowing, like we fear what we
Mhm.
don't know, right? So if we're not comfortable, if we're not used to seeing those who need extra help, those with disabilities, then, that becomes a fearful thing for us because we don't know it. But if we're
Mhm.
accustomed to it and then we're also empowered to help them, that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And my boys certainly were both accustomed to it and empowered to help. I would do my best to talk with them, explain things to them, teach them, for one, the value of patience, because here, when one of them needed help, well, all three needed help at once. They needed to know to wait their turn for their mom to
Right.
help, each of them as well as me, right? And to appreciate all that went involved in helping all of us.
Mhm.
They learned very early on, one, the importance of being patient, but two, the importance of family.
Mhm.
They really appreciate the importance of family. And all three are very close to each other. I mean, they're now 21 in three different colleges. First time they were ever separated in their lives was when they chose to go to three different
Oh,
colleges.
wow.
And yet they FaceTime many times. They visit each other. They speak on the phone to each other and do whatever they can to help each other when they can.
Mhm. Like, something you mentioned earlier too just really struck a chord with me. You were talking about the importance of family, and then you said when they would go out with friends, like, their first thought was, "We're having so much fun here. How can we bring dad here? We gotta make sure dad can come," and
That's
then,
right.
it's just how they want that bond and closeness with you and them that they've experienced that joy, and now they wanna share that with you, and you know at least for me, sometimes it's like I find my own little hidey hole, like, okay, this is my fun spot, my calm zone. Like, I don't want, like, I'm not going to tell anyone in my family about this fun spot. It's my little secret. But yeah, when we end up sharing it with those that we love, it becomes even more enjoyable and a deeper appreciation and love for each other. Like, this is something I've experienced, and now I want to experience that experience again with you.
Absolutely. I would do my best to include them in all my activities. If I had friends over, I would make sure the boys would be at the dinner table when we'd have friends
Mhm,
with older people, people that were over to visit, I still involve them in athletics, although certainly not football, but I would try to
mhm.
go to them to all their athletic events and talk to them about it. I'm very proud to say my boys are all involved in the martial arts. All three of them are second-degree black
Oh,
belts in
wow.
Taekwondo.
That's
They're
awesome.
absolutely incredible athletes, but they're also very good students,
Mhm.
and they appreciate their differences, but also their similarities in what they do with their brothers, but also have their own lives to live.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta imagine that I mean, in any household, each child kind of forging their own identity within the family is an important role, and gotta imagine that that is even more poignant as triplets. And so, how did you see that playing out, and how did you help them kind of like, okay, like find their own paths to the
Mhm.
point that, hey, like they're perfectly comfortable going to 3 different colleges.
Well, they're fraternal triplets, not identical, but even so, I had to remember, from step one to treat them all differently as three different individuals. We didn't dress them the same. We dressed them differently,
Yeah.
and they had different interests, and we needed to relate to them based on their interests. And while they did many of the same activities, we knew they were very different as individuals. And of course, I needed to be especially careful to treat them all equally, not show any favoritism. But quite frankly, I didn't have any favoritism. All three of them are just absolutely wonderful to be with. So that wasn't really difficult for me. But, I was very cognizant of it that, spend an equal amount of time with each of the three. And I just love the fact that they've stayed really close with each other and they recognize the importance of family.
I love to hear that. I mean, I think that's a good reminder to all of us dads and aspiring dads, that like,
Yes.
each kid is different, right? And it's funny, I heard something else where, for each kid, like they have different parents, even though they have the same biological parents, it's different parents because it's a different relationship.
Mhm.
Maybe less accentuated with triplets, but I always found that interesting. Like you have to approach them where they're at and their specific needs, and it's not just a, copy and paste or like a, one size fits all approach.
Absolutely, and I might add, I was 54 when the boys were
Mhm.
born, and wherever we went, it seemed like everybody thought I was their grandfather and not their father. So I kept having to explain, "Oh, I'm their dad," and
Mhm.
I think the boys were very proud of me seeing what I could do and how people reacted to me, and they enjoyed spending time with me, which I was so proud of and so pleased to
Yeah.
see. They liked being home and with us as a family.
Mhm.
I think that's something that,
Mm.
most parents will aspire to is like we want to like be a family who enjoys spending time together. Is there anything
Mhm.
that you and Anna did to like help foster that?
Well, yeah, we talked to them many times about how much the family helped me following my injury, which
Mhm.
was a lot of help because unfortunately I am totally dependent on others for all my activities, all my physical activities. I cannot wipe my nose or scratch an itch or dress myself or roll over in bed. And I've needed the help of family
Mhm.
many, many years to do that. And they appreciated that. And as a result, they appreciate family. But
Yeah.
also, I wanted them to recognize differences and appreciate them. My wife, Anna, is Catholic and I am Jewish.
Mhm.
So we brought up the family, the children to recognize and respect both religions and all religions for that matter.
Mhm.
I'm
Right.
19 years older than my wife. And I wanted them to appreciate that age doesn't make, a big difference in life if you really love each other.
Right.
Their mother is actually born and raised in Poland, while I've spent almost my entire life on Long Island, and they appreciated that their heritage is also Polish as well as American. And they grew up learning how to speak Polish as well. So they're bilingual. I mean, I wanted them to appreciate all the differences that we've experienced and value them and appreciate them. And I think that's made them better people.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a richness that comes with the different perspectives and the different experiences.
Mhm.
I'm curious regarding you being Jewish and your wife Catholic, is that like did you present them both like, okay, hey, these are, I believe this and your mother believes this, and we'll answer any questions you have, and then you left it up to them to decide their paths forward, or how did you navigate those conversations?
Well, in a number of different ways. First of all, we celebrated all the religious holidays at our home. We've got a nice big ranch house,
Mhm.
which we made accessible, obviously, to me in my wheelchair. So it was easier for relatives to come to us to celebrate rather than us to go elsewhere. So we
Mm,
celebrate all the Jewish holidays, whether they be Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, whatever the important or the significant Jewish holidays are. The family comes to us. We celebrate Christmas, and Christmas Eve we do a big event, and Easter, and the relatives come to us. So they grew up, enjoying the traditions of both religions,
Right, yeah.
and the family traditions and celebrating them. In terms of deciding which religion that they would follow, we thought it was important, and we heard from others that it was important not to say you need to observe them both, but to basically follow one, but appreciate the other.
Yeah.
mhm,
And my wife growing up was very religious, would go to church every single Sunday. I was not very religious. And we felt in order for them to get a religious background, I knew my wife would bring them to church every week.
Mhm.
I knew I would not bring them to temple every week. And that's not to be a slur against the Jewish religion. That was just me and that was my wife. And we knew what would work out best for our boys.
Right.
So
mhm.
they've been brought up Catholic, but celebrate all the Jewish holidays as well.
Yeah,
Mm.
that makes total sense. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Mm.
Andrew.
No, I was just gonna say that really I grew up in a mixed faith family as well, but it
Mm,
wasn't like that. My dad wasn't totally religious when I was younger. I didn't have like that exposure to his Christian faith as like what your boys would towards your Jewish faith. And so I can only imagine like how much deeper they understand like both your life and Anna's life and appreciate those differences and how they've shaped who you both are as people and as parents.
Very much so. And I thought it important that they believe in a spiritual being and that they honor and celebrate it no matter which way they choose to do that.
Ken, I do want to kind of shift gears a little bit. So, I mean, from my outside perspective, I see two like really big shifts in your life. One is on that football field, and I'm sure you had a massive like you saw yourself as somebody who was athletic up to that point. Your brother was, your dad was. So I'm sure that was tied a lot to your identity. So you had to kind of shift, I'm sure, your perspective of who you were as an individual then. And then I imagine the same thing also happened when all of a sudden, up to a certain point, you never saw yourself being a father. And then that changed as well. So how did how you perceived yourself as an individual change when you became a father?
Well, changed very much. And that was not a change that occurred overnight. That
Hmm.
basically took years and years to get used to. For one, I was a bit of an introvert before my injury. And now I had to rely on speaking up and
Mhm.
asking people for help whenever I need assistance because I couldn't do things for myself. But number two, I remember speaking at an event years after I was hurt, and somebody asked me to describe what I was like before my injury. And I remember saying, I played in high school on the varsity football team. I was on the varsity wrestling team. I played in 4 different softball leagues. I worked during the summer as a lifeguard. And also, I was a fairly good student as well. I mean, my grades were good enough to get me admitted to Cornell University,
Yeah.
one of the top schools in the country. But it even surprised me that the way I thought of myself was first as an athlete and then only almost as an afterthought that I was a pretty good student as well. So it took quite a while to get used to the fact that I need to be more intellectual now and more cerebral. cerebral, and less physical in the way I look at myself and the activities that I do. And I also look at the way I grew up with my father teaching us how to throw, catch, and hit a baseball and taking us to athletic events and watching sports together with us to being in a very different position as a father with my children. So I did my best to stay involved, expose them to many different sports, and still play a significant part in their upbringing. But it was very different than my upbringing.
So now, after having 21 years of being a father and recognizing the what you had already recognized from the get-go that like, okay, hey, my dad was very physical as a father, like physically involved, and that's not me. Like what are like 1 to 3 of the top things that you think or that you found make a good father?
Well, one is to show patience with your children, to show that type of calmness when you're dealing with them. Let them talk, be a part of what their concerns are and do your
Mhm.
best to respond in a calm but appropriate way.
Mhm.
Two, to be interested in what interests them and to show I want to be a part in all their activities and have them talk to me about what they are. And three, for me to make sure they grow up with the right values and the proper character so that they become good individuals that people can be proud of. And I wanted to include them in any significant family decisions that we make. I mean, you need to understand, I know you told a little bit about, my upbringing, my young life, but my mother died when I was less than 1 month old. She died during the polio epidemic, and she unfortunately had polio and died when I was less than a month old. So I grew up being particularly close to my father, because he basically was doing everything with us, and, along with the help from grandparents. And then when he remarried, I was still 4 years old. It was not a happy marriage and it ended in divorce. And I wanted to make sure that my children knew we do have a happy marriage. We're equal partners in this marriage. And that it's important to recognize that people can live together and not just be one parent domineering over the other, but that we're an equal partnership, and they need to respect that, both the mother and the father, and that we need to be on the same page, my wife and I, whenever we're dealing with our children. So I wanted to make sure that that was important. And three, I wanted them to know each one of them was important in their own right. Again, not to just treat them as the triplets, they do this, they do that, but what each one does, what each one enjoys, and that we participate in each one of their activities.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question because this is a conversation Paul and I have been having over the last couple days. You said, the third point that raising them with the right values and principles. How did you discover or determine like what were the right values for you and that you wanted to instill in your boys or teach to your boys?
Well, part of that was my own experience in terms of people's prejudice to somebody with a disability.
Mhm.
People often treated somebody with a disability as if, they were totally disabled, not just have a disability that affected a certain part of their life, but that disability meant inability to do something.
Mm.
My boys saw that not only did I go back to school, but I had a very responsible position. I was an assistant district attorney, and not just an assistant district attorney. I was actually a supervisor in my office. And we'd bring the boys to work to show me, when my wife would pick me up from work, the respect that I was receiving from others, despite the fact that here I was so physically limited. I had lawyers looking up to me, asking me for advice.
Yeah.
And I wanted the boys to see that. So they
Mhm.
knew somebody with a disability can also have a lot of ability,
Right.
and that being different from others sometimes is a good thing. It's not necessarily a negative. It can be a good thing. And today, when you hear, let's say, our current administration seem to have a negative feelings about diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Mhm.
I don't share that feeling.
Right.
I feel DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, can be a very good thing for people. And I wanted our boys to experience that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a very positive
Right.
thing in their lives. And I wanted them to grow up recognizing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I think that's very important, that we take that time to like to recognize like what is important to us and to pass that on to those that we love. And you know, the I know we're kind of running out of time here, so I did want to save some time for your book, Ken. Among all the other things that you have accomplished, you've also authored a book. I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I actually started writing it pretty soon after my injury. I remember it was 23 weeks to the day that a friend of my Aunt Lorraine's by the name of Al Meglin came to visit me in the rehabilitation center and thought that one, by writing or talking to him about what I was experiencing, may, for one, help me deal with my depression because I was very depressed at the time. But two, would hopefully help others because very few people knew what a spinal cord injury entailed back then and what the rehabilitation process was. I mean, this was about 25 years before Christopher Reeve's devastating injury.
Mhm.
So most people didn't know much at that time about what a spinal cord injury entailed. So I started writing my book more than 50 years ago, but would start, stop, start, stop. And once our boys were born, I felt and my wife felt it was important for them to learn one, what I went through and how helpful the family was every step of the way. And two, that we all face challenges in our life. We all face different adversity at times during our life, but there's an awful lot you can do to face it and overcome it. And I wanted them to experience through me to appreciate the help that I received from their mother, my wife, who still helps me obviously every day, and the rest of the family, and that to never give up that there's an awful lot everyone can do if given the opportunity to show that they can do it.
Yeah, that's so
So,
true, but so necessary to
right,
hear on a day-to-day level at the same time.
and I just would like to share with you how I came up with the title of my book. I
Please.
dream of things that never were. Um, About 6 months after my injury, I was asked to testify before a United States Health Subcommittee chaired by Senator Edward Kennedy. And after my testimony, Senator Kennedy sent me a glass paperweight in the mail that had an inscription on it that the senator said his late brother Robert Kennedy liked very much. And the inscription read, "Some men see things as they are and say why. I dream of things that never were and say, why not?" And that's where I got the title of my book, I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story, because I wanted the boys and everyone else to appreciate there's still a lot everybody can do, despite what the naysayers
Mm,
may say.
Yeah.
It's not a question of other people saying something's impossible. It's how you feel about yourself.
Right.
I
yeah.
believed I could still accomplish anything I set my mind to. And I tried to do things in my life that people thought were impossible or hadn't been done before.
Mhm.
And that's how I've decided to live my life. And I wanted my boys to learn and appreciate there's an awful lot everyone can do if given the opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm grateful that you explained your title because I was taking it the other way, like like these things never could be, and which is at complete odds with what you are with sharing with us today. So I'm glad you
Mhm.
explained that for my sake because I was hitting a brick wall. And yeah, I think that is such an important message. And uh what, and thank you for your example to the rest of us of like
Mhm.
of yeah of not giving up when you had such like every excuse to um and showing that, okay, hey, it is, things are still possible. You can still forge a life that is worth living. And I know you said this is the last thing I want to ask before we go into our final segment, but you also dealt with, and I mean, not surprisingly, depression. Well, like what I know you said writing, that practice of writing was one thing that helped you, but what else has helped you keep dreaming about things that never were and keep chasing those things and not give in anywhere along the way?
Well, it certainly wasn't easy. I might add, about 9 days after I finally got out of the hospital, I went back to Cornell University to try and complete my degree. Now, this was about 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act took effect. and virtually nothing was accessible. My first day back at school, I had to be either pulled up or bounced down close to 100 steps. But I decided, I didn't have a plan B. I decided I had to make this work, and I became the first quadriplegic to ever graduate from Cornell. But I knew that engineering, which I was studying, was not a really viable field for me. So, based on the advice of a psychology professor, I changed my career goal, decided to pursue a career in counseling. And I became the first quadriplegic to ever earn a graduate degree from Cornell, where I earned, a Master of Arts degree. And then increased my counseling credentials. I went to Columbia University, where I earned a second master's degree. This one was in psychological counseling and rehabilitation. And then I decided to look for a job as a rehabilitation counselor. And despite the fact that I now had 3 Ivy League degrees, 2 from Cornell, 1 from Columbia, and 2 master's degrees, no one would hire me. I looked for a job for a year and sent out more than 200 resumes. It seemed everybody felt I was just too disabled to work. But finally, I found one organization willing to give me that opportunity, and that was Abilities Incorporated, which is part of what's now called the Viscardi Center, that's founder Dr. Henry Viscardi Jr., and that changed my life. Finally, I was now in a position where I could help others.
Yeah.
Now, this was in 1977. I had been receiving so much help from so many people for close to 7 years, and now for the first time, I was in a position to help others.
Mhm.
And that made a tremendous difference in my life and made me feel so much better about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I love to hear that. There was a study that I heard about a number of times. It's one of the longest running studies done. I believe it was a Harvard study, and it followed students from when they were in college to late in their lives. And they what they determined was one of the strongest factors of what led to a happy and fulfilled life. It was less what they did and less what they were capable of doing and more the quality of relationships that they had around them. And that's one thing that is apparent to me is like from the very get-go, you've had family and friends who have been there for you through thick and thin, and you in turn are giving back and fostering that community. And I think that is a very powerful thing.
Thank you. And I believe that very strongly. And just on a personal level, it made me feel so much better about myself. It increased my feelings of self worth, my self esteem, my confidence, the fact that I could make a difference in other people's lives
Mhm.
really was a life changer for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Ken, I know we are almost out of time here. So just a couple of quick questions. Do you have a hard stop at the top of the hour?
No, I
And
don't.
okay,
I'm
Okay.
fine.
okay. So you're okay if we go over a few minutes? Okay, thank you. A few questions we like to ask our guests. One is, what is the number one habit that helps you show up as a dad?
Well, just knowing that I could make a difference in my children's lives and to help lead by example, to show them that there's no challenge too difficult that they cannot face in their life. So I wanted to help give them the self confidence
Mhm.
to know they could do whatever they set their minds to do. And I wanted them to know I'll always be there to help in any way that I can, but I'm looking forward to watching them be the best they can be. And I hope they would include me in any significant decisions they needed to make about their life. And I tried to include them in any significant decisions I make about my life. And to know we're a family through thick and thin. We'll always be a family. And I wanted them to recognize we're going to stay close no matter how old they get, no matter how old I get.
Right.
We're a family.
Mhm. I love that. Yeah, family is everything.
It
Andrew?
So, just as a single guy wanting to be a dad, your story is so inspiring to me. Just from going all in and being an uncle, and then wanting to have those kids despite the odds and going for it. What is one thing that you wish all men in my position wanting to be a dad, not there yet? What's one piece of advice you would give to us in order to prepare ourselves for that, or just to take advantage of where we are now?
Well, the first thing I would suggest is finding the perfect woman to be your wife. I mean, that made an enormous difference in my life. For one, to have the perfect woman to be my wife, but two, to recognize that's also the perfect woman to be the mother of my children. And I was very fortunate that I found that. But two, it's very scary being a dad for the first time, since it's something that none of us have gone through in the past. If it's going to be the first time, we all have certain feelings of insecurities or
Hmm.
doubts about whether we could do it. And we've all experienced that. But to recognize you can do it, you just need to have the right attitude, approach it the right way, and to know it is so worth it. No matter what the challenges are, no matter what the expenses are,
Right.
it is so worth it. And it changes your life. Your life is never the same once you become a father. And it
Mhm.
changes in a good way, in a very good way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
well, thank you, Ken.
One more question, Ken, and that is if you had um y- a a, b- a billboard that you could put anything you wanted on, let's just say a billboard in Times Square, what would that billboard say?
Well, that it is so important to set an example for your children. You need to help them grow up with the right attitude, the right values, develop the right character to not only be proud of them, but for them to feel good about themselves, for them to realize that they have a lot of blessings in their life and they need to share that with others, that they know that there are others that are less fortunate than them, no matter what their circumstances, and to recognize that they're in a position to help others and to make sure they grow up knowing that they can make a difference in other people's lives if they appreciate the value they have and what they could do to make other lives better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's powerful.
Mm.
I'm going to have to mull over that one because, like, yeah, if you don't, you have to recognize that you have something to give before you can give something,
Yeah.
and then you have to take that action to do that. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that, Ken. And lastly, where can folks find you?
Well, they can go on my website, which is kenkunken.com. That will tell them more about my life, as well as it'll tell them more about my book and how they could purchase it. My book's available not only in a hardcover, but in an ebook version and a Kindle version, as well as in an audiobook version. And I might add that I narrated the audio version with my son Timothy actually doing the recording. So
Oh,
that's
that's
how we
awesome.
did it. My son Timothy did
Yeah.
the, and that was the first time he actually heard about my full story.
Oh, wow.
All of them have read the book, but
Hmm.
Timothy actually did the recording for it.
That's cool. Yeah, I was going to ask if you narrated it. I'm glad the answer is yes. So, well, Ken, thank you so much for your time, and Anna, thank you as well for yours. And yeah, what a great show. Thank you for sharing your story with us. The number of challenges that you have overcome, the values and principles that you
Hmm.
have defined for yourself and stuck to and pass on to your kids through it all. And now you're not only have you been sharing it with them and those that you touch through your work, but now you're also sharing it with the rest of us. So thank you so much,
Yeah.
Ken. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and be sure to like and subscribe and share this with somebody you think would enjoy it. Until next time.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Paul. Thank you all.
And thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share my story.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We're honored to hear it and receive your wisdom.
Thank you.
Yep.